This encounter was not too long ago and solidified in my mind why I will always close the blinds at night and why, even in a quiet suburban neighbourhood, you should always lock your door. I've been reading creepy stories online since I was about 12, when I first discovered Tumblr and Reddit, Creepypasta, Sixpence, No Sleep, and of course, Let's Not Meet. So I have long since taken to checking all windows and locks before I go to bed, and closing blinds and curtains for fear I might look out to see some creep in a clown costume with a knife in my garden, or a child with their head at an unnatural angle. I always sort of wished I had a creepy encounter so I could write about it, but if I never have another experience like this for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. So, context. This nice suburban neighbourhood, as I say, is home of my parents, a little town in Cheshire, England, quiet street where we all know each other. Low crime rate except one house which has been heavily burgled twice in about 10 years. Both were opportunistic. Once because the keys were near the door and the invader smashed a small pane to reach them and let themselves in. The other time they had left their blinds open overnight, leaving their laptops, wallets and both cars' car keys on full display. Anyway, I don't live with my parents anymore, but I was back in town and staying with them for a few days over summer. I was sat in the kitchen, which faces onto the street, and working on my laptop, just glancing up occasionally to watch people pass by walking dogs or strolling with a pram. I'd seen something moving in my peripheral, so, like every time, I looked up hoping to see a dog walker or one neighbour and her newborn grandson. Nope, two people, a man in a semi-casual suit and a woman in plain jeans and a blouse, but they were moving weirdly. The woman had her head craned over to one of her shoulders, and her arm on that side was bent backwards and unnaturally upwards with her hand rhythmically flicking. Her other arm randomly but smoothly glided about, guided by her elbow. It was a bit like when you try and push two magnets together at the same point of polarity. That's how I'd describe it. I have friends with epilepsy, and I've never seen them contort or flick like that. Not even their myoclonic jerks. The man looked more like one of those dancing inflatables you see at a used car dealership. That's the only way I could describe his movements. They walked past my parents' house and I instinctively called to my cat to check he wasn't outside with those weirdos. I found him upstairs in my old room. He was looking out of the window, and as I followed his gaze, I see two of the kid neighbours in the double burgled house waving across to me. Well, to my cat, but I waved back all the same. I went downstairs to tell my parents about the strange moving people, and my dad just furrowed his brow, asked if they were gone, and said to double check that the door was locked. I headed back to the kitchen to check our back door was locked. This door doesn't have any windows in it, so you can understand I jumped out of my skin when, as I put my hand on the door handle, it was pushed down from someone else on the other side. I push on the door immediately, before anyone can push it from outside. I also must scream because I hear my dad call back. I hear his footsteps coming through the house, then I hear a loud gasp on the other side of the door, and out of the kitchen window, guess who I see making a retreat? Creepy moving dude and dudette. By the time my dad's made it through the house, they're gone. He doesn't seem to believe me, although also doesn't seem doubting either. He's never seen them before and takes a free pop at me for being discriminatory against potential house guests with movement disorders. We make jokes like this because I had a movement disorder as a kid, and one time a parent wouldn't let me to her son's birthday party because they would be playing Simon Says and I made it difficult for the other kids. I digress. Anyway, these people were gone. I don't sleep well, due to that movement disorder actually, and those scary stories I read meant that I will always listen to the excessive creaking in this house and noises on the street outside, like people walking home drunk and foxes mating. Most of the sounds are quiet though, so imagine my shock when my straining ears are suddenly attacked by a child's scream. It takes me a second to locate the sound, and another to lurch from my bed to the window, looking straight over to the upstairs window. The same one where, not 12 hours ago, my neighbour's children were waving to me from. I scanned down the house and saw their front door wide open. I shouted to my parents, hoping to wake them up as I flew down the stairs in my PJs, with 999 already dialed on my phone to report this likely home invasion before I do anything else. I'm remembering to scream fire, not burglar, as I stride across the road, attempting to wake other neighbours and gather support en masse. There are 2 kids and a teenager in that commonly burgled house, kids who I babysat for 10 years, and one of them just screamed, at 2 AM when their front door was wide open. I make sure I say this out loud to the emergency responder on the phone. As I near the door, I can see a figure inside, moving frantically. So after telling the phone responder what is happening and answering their brief questions, I shout into the door from a safe distance some phrases the police gave me to say. "The police are on their way. We are right outside and we're getting help. Is anyone hurt?" And to tell the intruders, "We know you are there. Please do not hurt anyone. The police can help you." I get a response from the upstairs window and step back onto the road to see the mother holding all 3 kids in her arms, and she tells me the middle child, who's 9, found intruders on the stairs when she went to get a drink in the night. The girl, Imogen, tells me they're like clowns. Clowns? This extra detail is the straw that broke the camel's back, and my vision darkens. Shit, I'm going to pass out. The last thing I hear is Imi telling her mum I said a bad word. I came to in the middle of the road with a foil blanket on and a soft Octonauts toy under my head. I could see lots of blue lights, 3 police cars and an ambulance. That one's for me. And I can see my neighbour out of the corner of my eye. My hearing returns as Imi tells me her little brother volunteered his toy because I hit my head when I fainted. Suddenly I'm up and looking around to count all 5 of the family members and checking for injury. Over the top of their heads, I can see an arm frantically waving in and out of view. Yep, moving weirdos broke into my neighbour's house. I see the woman is standing still, her head still slumped to the side, just as she's lowered into a police car. I was later told that as I spoke to my neighbour out their bedroom window, their dad had gone to fight the intruders and kicked the woman down the stairs as she was climbing them. The man was the frantically moving shadow I had seen from the doorway. Police reckon they'd been trying doors down our street and found one unlocked. I told them about the couple trying our door earlier in the afternoon. I'm guided to the ambulance and sat on the bed whilst the paramedics tend to a large cut on the back of my head from my fall. I vaguely feel them removing gravel, cleaning, gluing and dressing it, but I'm preoccupied watching 2 police try to contain the human dancing inflatable man. They can't catch both arms at the same time to cuff him, so eventually one policeman is cuffed to one of the man's hands and thus has his arm flung every way as the man continues to move. I have no idea what they've been tried with, if they were on drugs or had a movement disorder, or when the court hearing is yet, but as a key witness, I'll be told when they need me in court. But I would happily go the rest of my life without hearing a kid scream at 2 AM and seeing those weird moving creeps. So, creepy dancing dude and dudette, let's not meet. I haven't been able to sleep lately, here's why. Thanksgiving night last year, my wife and I had just completed a brutal drive coming back from visiting our family nearly 4 hours away. Since we were both due back to work the next day, we tried our best to get in bed as fast as possible, skipping our nighttime routine. The only thing we did do was take our Shih Tzu poodle out to use the bathroom. We were exhausted, and after taking the dog out, we both went to bed and fell asleep pretty fast. Fast forward to 5 AM, it's still dark outside, and my wife woke up after hearing our front door slam. There's only one way to get in and out of our apartment, and that's through the front door. She quickly realised I was sound asleep next to her, and she hadn't just slept through me leaving for work. Then, our dog started growling, in a way I've never heard any dog growl. It was ungodly, and for the sake of re-emphasis, I've never heard a dog growl like this ever. He jumped out of bed and started barking at the door, waking me up in the process. Jolting out of bed, I opened the door to the bedroom and there he was. Standing in our living room, between me and our only chance of escape, was the shadowy figure of an incredibly tall, hairy man, built like a brick wall. He was wearing nothing but a pair of stained boxers. My heart leaped out of my chest. I grabbed a hunting knife from my dresser drawer, not really sure as what to do, since I'm the last person who'd win in any kind of fight. I'm a 120-pound nerd. I stood between him and the door to our room, staring him down for what seemed like an eternity, an open blade in my shaking hand. He was incredibly gross and hairy, like a transient who hadn't bathed in weeks. I could smell the foul stench of rot coming off him. I realised that, having just woke up in a haze, I was still adjusting to my surroundings. Even with the adrenaline pumping, it felt like a vivid nightmare more than a reality. My dog was flipping out at this point, trying to get out of the bedroom. I did my best to get him back in the room while keeping my eyes fixated on this shadowy figure. At first I just wrote it off in my head, There's a saloon next door and this guy could just be drunk and disoriented. Yet, as we stared each other down, I started to notice he had something massive in his hands. I couldn't quite tell what it was. The room was only lit by a nightlight we've used to avoid running into living room furniture at night. Then all of a sudden, I guess he may have been sobering up to where he was at. He dropped the item and bolted out the door, shattering our screen door in the process. As soon as it was over, I ran back into the bedroom to comfort my wife and call the cops. Once we heard our next door neighbours calling out, I felt a sense of relief. I turned on the lights and met them at the door, explaining what was going on. Obviously they were pissed with the dog barking, but after they heard glass shattering they knew something was up. Our neighbours were an elderly couple in their mid-70s, and the husband came out with a handgun just to be safe. Once they came into the apartment, my neighbour with the gun noticed the item the man had dropped. He turned to me and asked me why there was a shotgun on our floor. I turned white. This man, in boxers, had come to my house in the early hours of the morning with a goddamn shotgun, yet for some reason he decided not to use it, dropped it, and ran. This guy was not only capable of physically breaking me in half, but he had a shotgun. I was scared, confused, and for every minute that I didn't see the cops, I felt a sense of impending dread. My wife was bawling in the bedroom, still on the phone with the cops. My neighbour raised his weapon and checked it for ammunition. Around the same time he did this, the cops had arrived, weapons drawn. After subsequently getting my neighbour in handcuffs and confiscating his weapon, I told them what had happened, and that my neighbour was merely doing the right thing trying to protect us. I assumed we had just forgotten to lock our door due to the exhaustion, but my wife distinctly remembers locking it before going to bed, something we still argue about to this day. Even though I was the only one who saw him, my wife remembers hearing the door open and shut, which woke her up. It's metal, so it made a pretty loud sound. My neighbours remember someone trying to open their door, and the entire apartment complex was aware to the commotion around them. The police took statements, searched the area for hours, and had a patrol unit keep tabs of our apartment complex for a couple of days. Nothing ever came of the resulting police effort, not a single trace of the guy except for the weapon he left behind. They, of course, analysed the weapon, but the serial number was removed. It was later revealed that the shotgun wasn't in working condition and no ammunition was recovered. I'm sure they went through and did their due diligence, collecting fingerprints and running it through their database, but after several weeks of trying to follow up with the department, it was obvious to me that things weren't going to be resolved anytime soon. I talked with the folks at the saloon next to my apartment and gave them my description. They had already talked to the police, and nothing matching that description came up on their CCTV footage of that night. Our apartment didn't have any security at the time, and being that it was a nicer part of town, not many people felt threatened enough to start using Ring doorbells yet. After about a month, I stopped paying attention to the incident. My wife was still somewhat traumatized, and we moved shortly after. I let it out of my mind and went on with my life. Just recently we welcomed a baby boy into our lives, and I'd become so far removed I almost put it out of my mind. I put it out of my mind, that is, until I started dreaming about it every night for the past week. I've been having dreams about this moment. Sometimes the dream takes place in our apartment, sometimes it takes place in my current home. In my dream the night before last, he was holding my son, and ever since then I've had this dread. I even felt the need to install a Lorex CCTV system on our house. Something I hadn't really thought about surfaced in these dreams. The expression on this guy's face wasn't one of surprise or fear. He was excited and smiling at me. At least, that's the way I see it in my dreams. It's keeping me from a good night's sleep. And at Thanksgiving my family even noticed. I live 4 hours away now, so far out that this guy couldn't possibly be a threat, right? I longed for the nights when my mother would don an evening gown, punctuate every sentence of her lecture with the clicks and the clacks of her high heels as she strutted to the door, and leave a deep red imprint of her lips on my forehead before she allowed herself to be whisked away by her suitor of the night. Those nights are rare when your single mother works 12-hour shifts at the local nursing facility and comes back home to a long evening of drinking, loud television and heated arguments with her children. This night was better than all the others because the universe had aligned the plans of everyone in the household to coincide, leaving me behind for at least 5 hours worth of quiet alone time, something I rarely got. I was in my bedroom, my secret stash of snacks scattered all over my bed, and the one shared laptop we had in the house all to myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do first. Watch a movie? Sing along to karaoke songs on YouTube? Have a one-woman dance party? I settled upon watching a scary movie and turned off all the lights to set the mood. I was barely past the 30-minute mark when I heard the distant sound of snickering. For a few seconds I convinced myself that it was just background noise from the movie I was watching, but my reassurance faltered when I paused the film and still heard it. I was frozen in place. I didn't know what to do. I just waited for something to happen, but nothing did. I slowly shifted my position. The bed frame creaked under my weight as I did so. I planted both of my feet on the ground and paused for a few minutes. It was most probably one of my siblings who had come home early and was playing a prank on me. It couldn't have been one of the neighbour's kids. Whoever it was, I was a 16-year-old girl who wasn't taking any chances. I finally had the mind to scan the room for anything I could use to defend myself. I shared my room with 6 and 8-year-old girls. The entire place was childproof and my best bet was a heavy sports trophy, but I figured that it was better than nothing. The snickering got louder and nearer. It was turning into chuckles. I didn't know whether I wanted to wait in here until I was found or do the finding myself. I took another long, hard look at the trophy in my hand and decided to wait. With each minute that passed, the laughter increased in volume and enthusiasm. It sounded like a child who knew his parents were headed towards his hiding spot during a game of hide and seek, laughing with the voice of an adult. Then I heard the sounds of chairs being dragged across the hardwood floor. It didn't sound like it was with much purpose other than to clear them out of the way. A slippery, slobbery, wet noise followed suit. It sounded familiar, yet it wasn't one I had particularly heard before. Whoever was in my kitchen was slamming, ripping apart and mushing whatever it had in its hands. I heard squishes and squelches, and I could only assume that it was some sick psychopath with a fetish for breaking into houses and mauling large animals. Whatever it was, he was laughing throughout. I was terrified. There was a stranger in my kitchen laughing manically as he seemingly prepared himself a snack on the counter. There was an intruder in the downstairs of my house, the place where I had left my cell phone. I turned around and looked at my laptop, wondering if the police would respond to emails. I decided to give it a try anyway and tiptoed back to my bed. My trembling fingers struggled to type slowly and quietly, but I eventually managed to send an email and post for help on social media. An excruciating 7 minutes passed by until I heard someone pull up on the driveway. It didn't sound like the police. I heard the sounds of heavy footsteps running up to the front door, frantically jamming keys into the keyhole and swinging the door open. The laughter stopped for a brief second before it turned into a roaring guffaw. A shriek and an ear-piercing scream penetrated the silence of the neighbourhood, and whoever produced it turned around and ran towards the street, taking their screams with them. The manic laughter followed suit, and I finally dared to run to the bedroom window. I saw my sister running down the street while screaming, trying to attract as much attention as she could, and by the looks of it, she was succeeding. Running in the opposite direction was a naked man, covered in a massive amount of blood that I had only seen before on television. He was still roaring with laughter as he disappeared out of sight. I watched out of the window as a posse gathered just outside my house. My sister hadn't stopped screaming. I realised then that she wasn't trying to attract attention, but she was actually hysterical, and I did not want to go downstairs and greet whatever had brought my sister to such a state. The crowd grew larger as a flash of red and blue lights arrived and footsteps stormed into my house. I heard curses and retches downstairs before someone finally called out. All I could manage to produce at first was a squeak. A female officer appeared in my doorway and asked me if I was alright. She told me to follow her with my eyes closed. Great advice for a rebellious teenager. I noticed her grasp became tighter as we reached the bottom of the stairs, and I couldn't help treating myself to a peek. Through squinted eyes, I saw the dismembered body parts of my mother neatly arranged beside her decapitated head on the kitchen counter. I passed out. 47 minutes. That was how long I had spent listening to my mother being torn into, ripped apart, mutilated and eaten. The person responsible for that ran straight to his nursing facility, straight to his bedroom, and straight into bed. He laughed as they restrained him to his bed. He laughed as he was taken away in cuffs. He laughed as he was locked up in a cell. He laughed as he made eye contact with me in the courtroom as his sentence was being announced. I won't be surprised if he was still laughing when they strapped him to the chair. He will never laugh again. Nor will my mother.